Hello friends, welcome to the channel. My name is Gabi Koinov. I'm a licensed therapist, and I started this Licensed Therapist React series as a way to vent and comment that I think politics today is mentally ill. Oftentimes, the positions that we're being offered are extreme and they make no sense. They do not reflect the average day-to-day person. And if somebody came into my office with this level of ideology that I typically get fed by my algorithms that I'm hearing is more and more common, amongst other people and their algorithms, I would think that the person, there's something imbalanced about the person. You know what I mean? It's not the healthiest thing. And so, I started this series to kind of vent about it and hope to be a part of the change towards having more reasonable and rational conversations. So today I am reacting to Norman Finkelstein in some type of debate. This is a clip from that debate, and I don't know how it was edited to give Norman a little grace, but the way it's edited here is really terribly. I think, there's a lot of things to crack into over here, and the first thing I'm going to say is that this video deeply, deeply disturbed me, not because criticizing Israel is off limits, because of course Israel is a country just like any other. They make lots of mistakes. There is lots of criticism to go around to the state of Israel. But for me personally, as a Jewish person, what makes it so much harder to be able to criticize Israel is when you have extreme people like Norman, where he takes some of these criticisms, overgeneralizes it, blows it up to a massive scale, and then holds Jews accountable in saying that like Jews and Israelis too should be shunned on campus. So like when you blame Jews for the actions of a foreign government and hold them accountable and say that they should be shunned on campus, that is where all of us need to draw the line and understand that this is anti-Semitism. Even if your view is correct in what you're thinking, right? The reaction, the response that you are doing is not going to solve the issue, only becomes some type of weird moral virtue signaling, and then causes anti-Semitism. So when you take views like this, right, and you broadcast them to massive amounts of people, right? This video has 265,000 views that do not have the nuance to necessarily understand that these people are not responsible for what's going on overseas. When you do that, right, we need to all literally just draw the line and be like, this is enough. He's just he's spewing anti-Semitism. Like, this is, not only does this solve the issue, right, it just makes things worse. Anyways, we're going to crack into this video here. I've sped up Norman's voice because he talks fairly slowly. And, I talk rather quickly. So we've sped it up. We're going to crack into it.
Harvard report had a very curious definition of anti-Semitism, and I'd like to read it to you. We define anti-Semitism as an identity-based bias that has kept Harvard affiliates with Israeli nationality or background from fully participating in Harvard's educational, co-curricular, or social life, which basically means if Jews or Israelis feel left out, then it's a form of anti-Semitism.
Just firstly on this, I really don't like how he's framing it. If Jews or Israelis feel left out, then that's a form of anti-Semitism. It obviously is, right? And the framing of like they feel, it's truly just like minimizing the struggle. This is why narrative is so important. Framing it in this way allows you to just minimize the struggle of the Jews and Israelis here in America that have nothing to do with what's going on abroad. They truly have nothing to do with it. And yet, why are they being shunned? Why is that okay? Can somebody please explain to me how that's not anti-Semitism? Blaming a Jewish person for crimes, supposed crimes that they did not commit, right? That is obviously, clearly anti-Semitism, right? Look, nobody is forcing anybody to hang out with anybody that they don't want to, but to have a coordinated effort against somebody's race or religion or ethnicity or whatever it is wrong. It's just plain and simple. So, like, I really don't like how Norman is phrasing it, and it's much worse than Norman's making it sound, and Norman should really be more sensitive to this, given his own background. But let's move on.
And a large part of the report is devoted to this phenomenon they call shunning. So to give a couple of examples, I'm quoting, Israeli students reported feeling particularly targeted and ostracized, frequently experiencing social shunning. Accounts of social shunning emerged as one of the most alarming indicators of the breakdown of Harvard's on-campus community. Some Jewish students expressed sadness and frustration at feeling shunned, and so forth. So I'm going to just give some context.
Yeah, anybody can add on the comments if they feel that social shunning is not anti-Semitism. Again, nobody is telling anybody that they have to hang out with somebody. But in this specific circumstance, you're talking about Jews and Israelis that do not have anything to do with what's going on abroad, and yet they are being shunned, losing friends, ostracized. It's horrible. One of the primary reasons people go to college is to make connections, is to have that social experience. And especially at that age when you're looking for your tribe, right? And college is one of those places where you're supposed to be meeting friends. To have a coordinated effort where all of a sudden this group of people we are excluding, we are leaving out, it's just wrong. It's truly not right. And somebody can argue with me in the comments if they choose. But let's hear Norman justify social shunning for a Jewish population.
Go to the reaction. So if you look at the public opinion polls in Israel, Israel is probably the most polled place on God's earth. If you look at the public opinion polls, about one half of Israeli Jews believe that Israel, the IDF, the Israel Defense Forces, should commit genocide in Gaza. That's not an exaggeration. The question that was put to Israelis was very concrete and succinct. When the IDF enters a city, should it kill every single person in the city? 47% of Israeli Jews said yes to that question. Another question was, do you believe there are any innocents in Gaza? Any innocents? It was asked of Israelis across the board, including non-Jewish Israelis. 62% said there are no innocents in Gaza. If you factor away the non-Jewish respondents, it would come to about 70%. If you turn to Gaza now, Israel, for better or for worse, it has a citizen army.
He's about to make another point. Look, I'm not here to argue with a poll, and if these numbers are true, they're truly frightening. But based on my experience of knowing Israelis and being in Israel too, this is not consistent. You know, I worked in camp last year as a camp rabbi. Probably 100 kids from Israel. This is the same year October 7th had just happened. And being a therapist also, with every kid I sat down with, and probably this is like 50, I talked to them. How are you feeling? What's going on? These are kids aged 10 to 16. And I asked them these questions. How do they feel about the war going on? How do they feel about innocent Gazans and people getting hurt? And all of them expressed heartbreak and remorse about what was going on. And they basically, all of them said, except for one kid, they wish it wasn't happening. So this just doesn't reflect my experience with Israelis. That being said, I'm not going to argue with the pollster. Like, I think what people don't understand is, like, if you go to Israel, you probably will understand, but it's like Israelis are people just like you and me. They have aspirations. They want to have families. They want to have good jobs. They want to have good careers. These are not like war-hungry people, you know? And it's truly sad that they're being forced into war. But, you know, I feel myself getting riled up, so I think we're going to move on from this point. I'm just finally, like, I'm just going to say here, I kind of have this feeling that, like, a poll is a dime a dozen. You know, who's taking the poll? What sample size are they picking? And I also just find it extremely hard to believe that, you know, these numbers that he's carrying, that he's saying, I could maybe believe like 1 in 10, but even that sounds high. You know, I it's kind of absurd to me, like, thinking about, like, do Israelis think like there's no innocent Gazans? I don't think that that's true at all amongst the civilians.
That means that
even amongst the army, I don't think that that's true at all. But yeah.
Representative of Israeli society. That army is carrying out a genocide. Every member of that army, EVERY, every member of that army is complicit in genocide. If it's not, as doctors have attested, if it's not targeting the skulls and chests of children, if it's not bombing the hospitals, bombing the schools, bombing any infrastructure in Gaza, the water and sanitation facilities, then they're involved in the systematic, methodical starvation, verging on famine of the people of Gaza. Now,
every single thing he listed, targeting an innocent civilian, contaminating water supplies, all that stuff is evil. It's terrible. It's horrible. I don't know the extent personally to which that is happening, but all of those things are obviously wrong. claiming also that like Hamas is hiding in a hospital or a school and then bombing that thing, knowing that there's going to be tons of innocent casualties, is that fine? I really don't think so. That being said, like, I'm not running a war. I don't know what's going on, truly, and I don't think Norman really does either. But all of these things that Norman obviously said is terrible. Is it genocide? Again, people can debate whether that's actually the legal definition or not. I do think that like when you have a strong word and a claim like that, it shuts down conversation in a way that like I'm sure like if you really presented all the facts and the evidence, like you can make a pretty strong argument to get any rational and reasonable person to feel like this is terrible and heartbroken. But as soon as you say that, it shuts down conversation because it's like it's in the even if you're correct in what you're saying, it makes people just feel attacked and you automatically are giving bad faith to the other side, and it makes it very difficult for there to actually be change because, excuse me, all you're gonna do is radicalize the opposition, right? It's like I think rational people are gonna hear this and then just be like that don't agree, that don't know all the facts that Norman maybe knows, and they're gonna radicalize in the other way and be like, no, Norman, what you're saying is definitely wrong. And look, and I think holding the entire Israeli army accountable for a subset of mistakes that Israel is doing. When, I think Israel would argue, and I think many people will argue, is that the majority of the people that Israel is taking down is Hamas, right? They would argue that this is, with regards to urban warfare, there's the least amount of civilian casualties in any urban warfare before. And maybe they're right. Maybe this is just the price of urban warfare. You know what I mean? And it's terrible and it's sad. And a lot of people are getting hurt. And it's like, it's impossible. I'm not going to sit here and justify it. But like, one could understand that Hamas is a terrible evil that needs to be eliminated. And it's not Israel's responsibility to care about the Gazan civilians. It should be Hamas's responsibility. And yet Hamas, instead of hiding their civilian population in their supposed, brilliant, massive tunnel structure, they are keeping them on the ground while they themselves are hiding. They're stealing aid. They're doing all sorts of terrible things. And again, I'm not an expert. I don't know what's going on in Gaza in the Middle East. And it's like, I'm only a human being. I'm only a person. And I don't really truly think Norman knows all the details of what's going on. But it's like, the expectation that like, I need to have the right opinion. I need to say the right thing. It's kind of absurd. And look, I think could the Israeli army do a better job at, minimizing these mistakes and protesting the kinds of things that Norman is talking about that maybe is going on? I think like, yeah, maybe. Of course, it's hard to know. I don't really know what's going on over there. But maybe, maybe they're severely valid points. But to then go and hold the entire Israeli population accountable for what the government is doing and maybe small subsets of the army are doing, I think that that's going too far. And it's a gross overgeneralization to say that every Israeli is responsible and complicit in a genocide. I think that's a little crazy. I do think there are lots of Israelis, protesting the war right now. Yeah, I mean, it's just terrible and tragic. And I think what I find extremely wrong in this conversation with regards to like I don't know what you would call it, pro-Israel versus pro-Palestine, what I find extremely terrible is the lack of being able to hold just exactly how atrocious October the 7th was and how evil Hamas is, to be able to hold that truth fully with the truth that what's going on with the Gazans is absolutely terrible and heartbreaking, and there are no words to describe the level of like a 2-year-old heads to a hospital because a building just collapsed at them, and then that hospital gets bombed, and then just the trauma, the damage, the injury, the heartbreak. It's devastating. And PBS did a fantastic documentary like about a year ago called A Year at War, where they, I would say, did a pretty good job at this, truly showing the atrocities of October the 7th, and then going on after that and truly showing the full-scale retaliation on Gaza. And it's hard. It's very difficult to watch. I think it's called Frontline: A Year at War, Israel-Palestine conflict, something like that. If you YouTube that, I'm sure it'll come up. They did a really good job showing both sides, I think. It's heartbreaking, and it's very difficult to go through. Trigger warning for anybody that's going to want to watch that. It was very difficult for me to stomach. Very, very challenging. But that is truly what's missing in conversations in the Israel-Palestine conversation sphere. There is no humanity, compassion, grace for the other side. You know, for these pro-Palestinian people like Norman, all the Israelis and the Jews are complicit in genocide. You're pro-Israel, you're pro-genocide. Like, okay, you know, very nice. Okay. And then the Israelis, you know, on the pro-Israel side, like, oh, you're pro-Hamas. You don't even want to talk to us. You're irrational. You're, you know, you just are anti-Semitic and, you know, hate the state of Israel or whatever, and all these things. And do they have some claims that are true about the other side? Of course. But when this is the conversation, how does anybody ever expect for there to be progress? And then at the same time, too, it's like, why are these people making it their life mission? Like, what's Norman going to do? Norman has no power. You know what Norman's going to do with his power? He's going to cause anti-Semitism on campus. So it's like, even if you have good intentions, what are you doing with the actions that you're choosing to take about this cause this noble cause that you're choosing to champion? You're just going to cause hate and crime, and you're doing bad things. Like, Norman, don't you, like, come on, man, you're not actually solving anything. And these opinions are extreme, and you're not helping people. You're just creating some type of dogmatic cult-like force of like, Israelis bad. Like, you kind of just starting to sound like the beginning of like shunning, and then, you know, what anti-Semitism does it lead to after? Like, you dehumanize people. It's sad. It's sad. It's sad that this is our political conversation. It's heartbreaking. Yeah, man. It's hard for me to even find words, and it's hard for me to even react to this because it's like there are real people getting hurt, and I don't want to trivialize this issue. And it's like, at the same time, you know, I'm not saying we should not talk about it at all, but I think the level to which it gets talked about is not healthy. And I think the average person watching and scrolling through and seeing all this damage that's going on, it's just vicarious trauma. It's not helpful. It's not good for people to be exposed to this and to be forced to suddenly have the correct opinion. Otherwise, you're going to be shunned. It's not good for our society. And it's really frustrating to me to have to constantly feel like, you know, and I think other people feel this much more than I do, but I too feel it. And it's like, it becomes really frustrating to feel like I need to have the correct opinions. And then if I talk, I'm afraid. I'm truly afraid of something like this hurting my business. I'm truly afraid of that, hurting my content, right? Like, and I know that my opinion is a little more centrist and nuanced, and it's like, that's going to piss everybody off. Where, you know, people that have strong opinions on this are on one side or the other, when I think your average day-to-day person is far more centered. And it's like, what is it, man? We're just addicted to this drama, to this fight, to this argument. Like, we need to rise above this and be better. Ask for better conversations and dialogues so that our algorithms aren't constantly feeding us this garbage where we're getting angry about other people's opinions and stuff. And it becomes truly exhausting for me as a Jew, where what Norman is doing here, he's putting this pressure on me. It becomes exhausting to me and truly unfair that I have to feel like I need to respond, defend Israel, say something against Israel. It's not my job. It's not my place to criticize a foreign country. It's not my place to criticize my own country. That type of responsibility should not be put on college students, especially when your solution is anti-Semitism, man. It's disturbing. It pisses me off. So I'm going to just move on.
When students, or I should say, when IDF soldiers come after their stint in the Army to Harvard campus, or there are Jews who are publicly defending a real-time genocide broadcast across the social media, the bulk of the report's recommendations are, we must be inclusive. We must be pluralistic. We must embrace everyone. I say no.
If Norman wanted to say Israeli soldiers after their stint in the army, I could understand that to some degree. But for Norman to go and accuse this specific soldier of targeting an innocent civilian, of doing the things that Norman has already identified as terrible and horrible and wrong, how does Norman know, right? Norman has no right to go and accuse this person of crimes that he never committed and say no. Harvard has their own standards, I'm sure. They're not accepting war criminals onto campus. And if they accepted this student onto campus to be a student, you should treat them with dignity and respect. If you happen to know information that Harvard doesn't, sure, go ahead and report this person. I don't know what the legal channels are, but like for Norman to take action into his own hands and take innocent people, or not known if they're guilty or not, and to automatically assume guilt and bad intent and crimes, I think it's just wrong. It's just bad on Norman, and I feel sad, truly, that he's just spewing this to students. And I feel like this is the type of stupidity that people go to college to avoid. And here's a professor kind of spewing this kind of stuff. It's just sad. I think holding an entire first of all, holding an entire army accountable for mistakes and bad, terrible actions that Israel has taken, that the army as a whole has done, I think is wrong, in the sense that, like, were those drone attacks, right? Could the army maybe have done better to avoid this? But maybe these people in the army don't know. Look, I don't know. I'm kind of struggling to find words here, but I think the overgeneralization that Norman does is wrong. It's evil too. Obviously it's not as bad as some of the things that Norman is accusing Israel of doing, but it's evil to then go generalize these things and put the responsibility on people that truly did have nothing to do with it. That's evil. It's wrong. It's look, you know what it's like? It's like, I don't know. It's like, to me, this feels similar to when COVID first came out, and then Trump is going like China virus. And when that happens, you have this uptake of hate crimes against the Asian Americans that very often aren't even Chinese. Even if they were Chinese, it just doesn't make sense. You get what I'm saying? It's stupidity. It's racism. It's a hate crime. Okay? You can't hold accountable people that have nothing to do with what's actually going on. And I know Norman is trying to make like a fancy case. If this, then that, then that. Like, Norman, you don't know if these people had anything to do with these terrible acts. You truly have no idea. And if you did, fine, but you don't. So it's like, come on, man.
They should be shunned. They should be ostracized. You ought not to be inclusive of child killers.
They should go to jail. Okay? They should not be shunned or ostracized. Like, you're vigilanting, taking law into your own hands. You actually have a real war criminal or whatever, fine. Have the trial. Let them go to jail, But for you to take action into your own hands and saying, these protesters, these people that are pro-Israel, these people that simply believe that Jewish people have the right to live and govern themselves in their own ancestral homeland, they should not be shunned. They should not be ostracized. And if you have a different opinion, if you have information that they don't know, why don't you talk to them? Why don't you debate them? Why don't you educate them? Why don't you do your damn job, Norman? Okay? Instead of shunning and ostracizing, why don't you educate? Right? Aren't you a professor? Why don't you debate? Why don't you actually give grace to the other side and have intellectual curiosity and be open and curious? Maybe they know something you don't. Maybe you'll learn something. This reeks of just dogma. It's cult-like. Like, we're right. We have the correct moral opinion. Anyone else, you're just shunned. Are these the people that you think have the correct opinions? The people that, like, just shun? Or are these the people that you think, like, they're just acting in defense? This is a belief that they have, and they're protecting their egos. Because if their belief gets dismantled, they become an empty human being on the inside. Because whatever it is, this dogma is fulfilling some type of religious purpose. That's what this feels like. You know what I mean? If this is a college and a university claiming to be open, you're not talking about a war criminal. You're talking about somebody that served in the army. Why don't you shun American soldiers? America has committed war crimes too. You know what I mean? Like, does it get brushed under? Do we not? Look, I'm whatever. I'm not going to throw shade at any government or any army, but it's like the American government, the American army has done truly horrible things as well. Do we shun them? Look, that's why this is more about narrative building than anything else, because nobody is going to say like, oh, America's committed genocide, right? We don't do that. There's a different narrative. But when you're willing to throw out Israel army is being evil and committing genocide and they're doing wrong, it's terrible. It's very sad for me to see. I think that this narrative is getting abused in order to hurt everyday people, Jewish people and Israelis alike. And it's sad. It's sad to see this coming from a professor. Like, I'm trying to, like, maintain a calm. It's hard for me because it's like this is kind of getting me angry and I'm trying to stay calm. So, yeah, let's move on.
You lose me there. Nadine.
The only way that we can effectively prevent these tragedies and these catastrophes is try to engage with those people who have been perpetrators.
Thank you,
I
Nadine.
think that
That's absolutely correct. You have to have conversations with people that you think are wrong. I think, Mick West, he had this phenomenal book called Escaping the Rabbit Hole, about getting people to come back from conspiracy theories. And what he talks about is like, if you're going to shun them and ostracize them and call them an idiot, you're only going to entrench them in their beliefs more. So it's like, if you think somebody else is wrong, why don't you open up a dialogue?
that even a war criminal should be admitted to campus for purposes of truth-seeking, for purposes of trying to prevent genocide in the future. And
I absolutely agree with Nadine here. I think, what she's describing is extremely idealistic. And again, maybe this should be done through bars of jail, so to speak, meaning like if somebody is a criminal or war criminal, they shouldn't necessarily be free or whatever, but to be able to debate these kinds of things and educate people is extremely, extremely, extremely important. And this is like a strange concept for a lot of people that like upfront, because you think of like a criminal and our system is extremely punitive and wants to punish people, and probably rightfully so. But the real way to be able to make change on a global scale is on these individual levels, having education be at the forefront, where it's like, we're talking about morals, we're talking about ethics, we're talking about the right thing to do. And we have these conversations, it happens publicly, and you win people over to the best side, right? As society shifts, as morality shifts, as we're having these kinds of conversations. This is how you create change for the better, right? People that don't know better commit these kinds of terrible crimes, and then it's like that's what happens, right? So having debates are extremely important. Having conversation is extremely important. And I don't mean debate for the sake of like winning an argument. I mean to truly be open-minded, question your own beliefs and values, and to educate truly, to come from a good place. It's really important.
Don't believe that the effective way to do it is to shun, shame, or ostracize.
I'm asking you, Cornel.
Nadine's correct.
Do you feel that those students are obliged to be inclusive of child killers? I'm curious, because I know you're...
This framing is terrible, right? That's already terrible. The Jewish people on campus are child killers? That's kind of crazy. Every single Israeli soldier is a child killer? It's really crazy. It's really crazy for them to assume that. It's just sad. And again, this is going off on a later part. So I don't know what's cut off and taken out of context.
You're very inclusive. Maybe your tent stretches from here to the other side of the galaxy. Do you believe that they should be inclusive of child killers?
Yeah, that's a hell of a way of characterizing it, though, because you see, part of the problem here, brother, is that, the history of religions, which has been for the most part the history of barbarism in terms of institutional religions, they have specialized in shunning people. And once you begin to shun, then the next step is dehumanization, subjugation, and you're just redoing the same cycle that you yourself were resisting from the very beginning. If we shunned every American who supported the extermination of indigenous people, there's not a whole lot of folk left in the history of if we shun the majority of Americans who supported the enslavement of black people, the lynching of black people, Jim Crow and Jane Crow, who's left? That's a small group.
No, this is a rhetorical evasion.
No, it's not. I'm speaking directly to your question. I'm just not agreeing with you.
Would you cavort and carouse? Would you cavort and carouse with a child killer? I'm curious. I don't think that's a trivial question.
No.
You wouldn't.
No.
You would shun them, correct?
I would do more than shun, brother. I'd probably cuss them out and lose my Holy Ghost and kick their behind in the name of Jesus. But the point is, that's not normative. That's not the only model that I want everybody to proceed. I want to love my way through the darkness. I don't believe in shunning, even given the crimes that people commit. If you got a different view, that's cool. I'm with you. We in the same demonstrations. We go to jail together, and we have fascinating conversations on child killers and how you respond to child killers. That's all.
Anyways, guys, I think to wrap up here, I'm not here to justify or criticize any actions of Israel. I think, people can debate that. I'm personally just extremely frustrated by the types of conversations that we're having politically. I'm actually going to reach out to Dr. Finkelstein. I'm going to see if he wants to come on the podcast for a conversation, because I want to be a part of the solution. I want to be able to say that, like, we need to have real conversations. We need to sit down. We need to actually give grace to the other side, understand where they're coming from, hear each other out. And look, ultimately, what's going on in the Middle East with this issue particularly is heartbreaking, and there's no way to get around it. And it's like, what I do find missing in political discourse, especially this issue, well, really, particularly this issue, is again, like this holding of both truths together simultaneously. I don't know what the solutions are, but you can't have, like, what does this become? What are we doing here? I don't know, man. Like, just look, what are we doing here? What ends up happening when we don't give grace, when we don't have empathy, when we're not willing to be fully rational and in the way that we're willing to see everything? What happens is that you have extreme reactions of terrible, terrible things that happen. And it's sad. We really need to expand our hearts and our minds to be able to have better conversations in politics if real change is going to occur, I think. Anyways, guys, thank you for listening. Definitely leave your comments down in the description. I'm very curious to hear from you. So, yeah, I'll see you in the next one.